Welcome to Crazy You episode 2, and in this video we're going to take the user comment below and turn it into a story. This is a subscriber comment from Eric S. Thank you, Eric. Antagonist. An old retired circus director without any family. He discovers that his closest mates are on a skiing trip to Norway. They didn't invite him. He is utterly offended and hurt. He can't imagine why, but suspects it might have something to do with the fact that he brags and exaggerates a bit. Or perhaps they envy him, he wonders. Bottom line, he decides that they are no longer his friends and he lays a plan to punish them. So the challenge of this project is in creating a story from that paragraph and ultimately creating antagonist, a believable and plausible antagonist from that particular paragraph. Now, what this exercise doesn't bring with it is a discussion with the instigator of this project, potentially director or producer or even star, for example. Now, without having even half an hour's phone call with the sort of instigator, I'm not sure of their vision, their budget, or really what they want to see as far as this project is concerned, especially even which format, whether it's movie or TV, etc. So because I haven't had that conversation, the latitude that I believe that affords me in the development of this story is vast. So as far as I'm concerned, I feel like I can go off in any direction I so wish. With the caveat, however, that this is an exercise and not a real project. So if you don't agree with any of the sort of direction of travel, by all means, stick some comments in the comment section below. If you like some of the direction, like what you like, and don't like what you don't like, by all means, it's your project that we are taking forward. Okay. So first things first, is this a TV movie or is it a cinema movie or whatever? As far as I'm concerned, the suggestion of a trip to Norway rather than actually showing a trip is kind of indicative of something that might be television based, because it's not actually showing the whole of that kind of the Norway trip in itself. Now, for this exercise, I'm kind of going to forget about budget, so I'm not going to worry about how much this is going to cost. I'm just simply going to show the development of the story, and we can worry about the issue, or pretend to worry about the issue of budget later on. So for me, because I don't have that constraint, I'm going to develop this for cinema. So this is a big screen movie. Okay. Also, stick around to the end of the video because I've got a new segment called Tip at the End. And in that, I'm going to go through and share some a development tip for screenplays, novels, whatever. So stick around to the end to watch that because it will be very useful, hopefully. Right, okay, so let's just dive in. So let's start with who is our antagonist. So, well, it's a man. They invariably are, unfortunately. Although he's old, he's pretty able-bodied, as indicated by the fact that he was actually up for skiing. We know he's without a family, although we don't know why. And we know that he brags and exaggerates. We also know that he is a retired circus director. So what is the antagonist's objective? Well, he wants to punish his friends for spurning him. I think we need to define what punish means. Are we talking about kind of injury, or are we talking about murder? But actually, I think this is a pretty good place to start the story from. The world of the story, well, for me, I think it's got to be the circus. I just love this idea of something based around a circus. I think it's kind of rich pickings. It brings some jeopardy with it. It brings some colour, and I think it's actually pretty cinematic as well as being interesting. There's also something about a circus that confines the story, which is great for creating tension, and I'm thinking kind of Die Hard with jugglers. Maybe not, but just a thought. Also, locking people in one place is like a kind of creates a real pressure cooker. So if you think about all those old Agatha Christie classics, then that's a really good example. There's also definitely something to explore in terms of the world of the story and the period and tones, etc. But we'll cover that in a subsequent video on world of story. Okay, so the first suggestion I'm going to make in this is to change mates to colleagues. It's not clear if they actually work together or not, but I want to lock all this story in tighter. Mates you can ignore, family and friends it's a lot harder, so I think I want to change it from mates to colleagues. So here's a general tip, and that is when you're developing a film idea, and it's cinematic, then make it as big as possible. Really try and pull back and pull out. If you think about the fact that generally you're actually only looking at, as humans, a sort of a very short space in front of your eyes, whereas a cinema screen is sort of 40 to 50 feet wide, so it's a huge canvas. So really make sure that you push the boundaries of the stories. And also, in my mind, this isn't just any old circus. This is the grandest and most famous circus in the world. Okay. So next up, what's motivating him? Well, this could be revenge. He feels spurned and rejected. But to me, that doesn't sort of quite work as yet. So I'm going to park it. Sometimes if you find, especially at this early stage when all you're doing is kind of moving, putting ideas around and just sort of spitballing and thinking what works, what doesn't work. Sometimes if you come across something that doesn't quite gel, then rather than kind of pushing at it again and again, just park it and come at it from a different angle later on. There's also a line about them possibly, his mates, now colleagues, possibly envying him, or at least in his mind. And that's really interesting because it reveals something about his character. So why is he doing this now? Well, that could be being spurned for the recent trip, but I also feel that the trip is probably more of a catalyst, if you like. It's the straw that broke the camel's back. His retirement could have been the catalyst, and maybe they spurned him because he's retired. I mean, if he was friends or with colleagues and they were sort of linked together, if he no longer works with them, he doesn't have to, or they don't have to engage him in the same way that they perhaps felt obliged to whilst they were shoulder to shoulder. I'm not quite sort of sold on all that yet, so I don't think it's quite working, so I'm going to park it. My second suggestion is going to be to change retired to retiring. It feels to me that the actual retirement is kind of a real threshold for the story. So I would like to kind of keep that for either the end of Act 1 or the sort of midpoint at the end of Act 3, or rather, the midpoint in Act 3. The note about him being without family is very interesting, and you just wonder what it would mean to somebody who perhaps has been harbouring these long-term feelings to suddenly be without family. So if there was a long-term resentment, then maybe if he was widowed, that would sort of cause a loss in his moral compass and make him reevaluate things and perhaps not put up with things that he's previously been prepared to put up with. So I think that's quite a good idea, or quite a nice sort of interest to pursue. What would be the life of a retired circus performer? Somebody who's gone from kind of life and death acrobatics to a life of hanging up the leotard and watching loose women. I think is kind of a huge radical shift. So I think I'd want to also explore what impact that would have on his character, because again it's showing this kind of real fundamental shift in what they do day to day. The important thing to keep in mind is what's their end goal. If this was their movie, And bear in mind, we are developing the antagonist just as yet. If this was their movie, what would be their final scene? What would it be at the end of the movie or the end of this story that they would want to see as the outcome? So we talked about punishment. So how is a group of people punished? Is this retired circus director somehow sabotaging performances? But if that's the case, then surely one person who's maybe injured or killed, there's going to be an investigation, and it's not going to quite work. I'm also struggling again about what punishment means, and how that punishment would sustain kind of 90 or 120 minutes. It would work if we were into kind of Saw territory, but what's going to keep the audience actually held in their seats during that sort of period of punishment? The other point I picked up on is a bit about he exaggerates and brags a bit. I want to drop the bit. Almost like say there is no bit in cinema. If we're going to scale everything up and up, then let's make him, I like the idea of him exaggerating. I like the idea of it because it's lies. And it kind of bragging and lying is good enough. I don't want to have the bit on the end. But I really like this as a character trait. This draws me in. It could also be where the personal jeopardy sits, because maybe the worst thing, and that's important, what's the worst thing that's going to happen to this character for them? Maybe the worst thing that could happen is that lie or exaggeration, etc., were to be exposed, especially if that meant damage to his precious reputation. So in order to protect that reputation, I think it's a really strong motivation for wanting to take some action. Protecting a reputation also ties in neatly with where they want to be at the end of the film, i.e. they would want to retire with their brilliant reputation intact. So I think we're starting to get some progress here. Let's just move on to what is the ticking clock. I think that has to be the circus tour. I think the idea of a moving circus with a sort of where something devastating is going to happen on the final night. If his retirement were to coincide with the end of the circus tour, i.e. it's his farewell tour, then that starts to look like a neat story. I also feel that establishing the farewell performance, the closing night, as the ultimate sort of showdown is right for getting a kind of spectacular climax to the movie. The other thing that's starting to emerge is a theme of kind of trickery and deception, because it's the lies and it's circus and it's illusion. Not only does this fit his character, it also sort of fits the mystery of the circus, and I think it's something to actually pin up, something to put on a post-it note above a sort of a writer's desk, because I think this theme needs to be woven as we get on to developing the cast of characters and the world of the story. I think we need to keep revisiting that and making sure it's sort of at the heart of those characters and ultimately those scenes. So let's go back to he discovers his closest mates are on a skiing trip to Norway. Now I don't feel this is kind of a sort of a meaty enough event in order to trigger all this. I think it's going to need some exposition, and that always sounds alarm bells to me. So, suggestion number 3, I think we kind of totally explode this trip side, and maybe the tour is actually World War II Germany, and that the Norway trip wasn't skiing but somehow connected with the German occupation of Norway. It also helps to scale things up because war's a great backdrop. It could also mean that the tour itself is kind of a cover for some dastardly plan. The period idea is really working for me. I think we'll explore this more in the sort of world of the story when we get onto that, but I like the idea, love the idea actually of a sort of a massive touring circus. I also think we need to get Hitler in there as well, and maybe it's part of an assassination plot, especially if the circus was the pride of Germany and Hitler was a guest on the closing night, and perhaps the retiring director has plans to assassinate Hitler, but in a way that will sacrifice not only the entire cast but also 1,000 audience members. So again, it's kind of, you know, it's big stuff. Now that's a great moral dilemma for an antagonist, because it's real and it's kind of tangible motivation. Is it reasonable to kill 1,000 innocent people in order to assassinate one person who will go on to kill tens and tens and tens of thousands of people if he's not stopped? Okay, so let's just recap. Our antagonist is Germany's most celebrated circus director who plans on going out with a performance that the world will never forget, in publicly assassinating Hitler during the tour's spectacular finale. The tragic loss of his wife has caused him to re-evaluate his life, and he no longer shares his colleagues' pride in Germany's utopian vision. With Hitler being so well guarded, however, the antagonist will not only have to sacrifice himself to pull off its assassination, but it also means the loss of life of 1,000 innocent German men, women and children. So he's clearly kind of mad, driven by the desire to kill Hitler, and we'll cover all the reasons why and all the more detail in the background. Let's not worry about that for now. Let's just get the broad brush, the big ticket items. So in the next episode, we're going to focus on fleshing out the world of the story. So feel free to stick in comments and suggestions about what you've seen so far, the direction of travel for this project, and also where you see it going. Because again, I've taken it in this direction. I don't mind in the next video, after the comments on this video, starting to reevaluate that. Because again, looking at this circle here, the sort of the merry-go-round, as we talked about, this is about feeding in ideas about character into story, into world of story, and constantly reevaluate each one. And the stuff that we don't like drops out and new stuff comes in. So it's completely fluid. So I just want to come on to the tip at the end. So the tip at the end here is, don't write screenplays, write treatments. I find time and time again, once a writer commits something to a screenplay, types at the end, and has the 120 pages all neatly presented in final draft or wherever, that there's actually a bit of a switch that goes off in a writer's mind to believe that actually that means that the project is to some degree over a big hurdle, which it is, but over that hurdle they tend to become kind of precious and protective about changes in the future to that story. So what I would urge you to do is, rather than get straight into a screenplay, and everybody loves to start to do dialogue and action and everything else, do the same thing, but do it in a treatment. Just write it in a Word file or whatever, and work through the story and rework through the story, and really put off as far as possible down the development line actually engaging in writing a screenplay until you are absolutely sure that the treatment is the very best it possibly can be. Okay, thanks for watching. We look forward to seeing you in the next video. Please show your support by liking and subscribing, and also add any comments that you want in the section below, as we've said. In the next video, we're going to explore world of the story and try and flesh out this kind of circus world, the sort of the link in with Hitler, the link with Norway, the link with Germany. Try and get an idea of where this circus is actually based, where it's moving from and to, and just try and get an idea of some of the important scene setting that needs to be done to explore this part of time. So that's next video, world of the story. Look forward to seeing you then. Welcome to episode part 2 of Crazy You. Welcome to episode 1. Welcome to episode 1, part 2 of Crazy You. So in this video, we're going to take the welcome to episode 2 of Crazy You, and in this video we're going to take the user comments as I identified. Welcome to Crazy You part 2. So in this video we're going to take the user comment and the suggestion about a story as like, are you waffling again? Welcome to Crazy You part 2. Welcome to Crazy You part 2, and in this episode we're going to take the comment from Welcome to Crazy You part 2. Welcome to Crazy You episode 2, and in this video we're going to take the user comment below and turn it into a story.